that movie. It was scary.
Well, the first one was, but the rest sucked.
Everybody knows horror sequels are terrible, right?
Second act needs work.
Wrong. Today, I'm going to be looking at one of these overlooked and often maligned pieces of cinema history to see the good and the bad, to find the diamonds in the rough. My name is Horrorman Mike, and this is Sequels Don't Suck. Hello, horror freaks, and welcome to a personally very special episode of Sequels Don't Suck. Today's film is one of the reasons why I wanted to start this video series, and I knew from the inception of Sequels Don't Suck that I was eventually going to do this film. I didn't tackle it right away for a few reasons. First, I wanted to cover The Fly 2 and Texas Chainsaw 2 because they were more impactful on my budding teenage personality. Secondly, I want to get good at my craft in doing these videos so that I could do this film justice. And thirdly, I wanted to release this on a very special day, but today is that day. For those of you who have been paying attention, that hockey mask has been up there since episode 1. Today we are covering a series that is very near and dear to my heart, and I mean that literally. Today we are taking a deep dive into Friday the 13th, Part 2. So buckle up and let's go. With the success of John Carpenter's Halloween, filmmaker Sean Cunningham was inspired to make his own formulaic horror film involving a past tragedy, a group of teens, and a mute killer. Although I could do an entire video on Friday the 13th alone, that's not the focus here today. Friday the 13th was released on the 13th of June in 1980, although there were a number of smaller theater pre-releases on May 9th. With a budget of $550,000, it made over $59,754,000 in profit. $5.8 million of that was in the opening weekend alone. Paramount Pictures saw the cash flowing in, and a sequel was greenlit and worked on right away. Like, right away. Friday the 13th Part 2 would be released on May 1st in 1981, a mere 322 days after the release of its predecessor, making it one of the most quickly released sequels for that day and age. Sean Cunningham was offered to helm the sequel, but he felt like he had already made Friday the 13th, and a follow-up with the same formula would just be redundant.
Been through all of this before.
Friday 2 was written by Ron Kurtz, who had uncredited writing experience on the first script, and would be directed by Steve Miner, who had worked with Sean Cunningham on the first Friday the 13th, as well as the Wes Craven film The Last House on the Left. Wes Craven actually directed Betsy Palmer in the scenes where she is superimposed over our final girl, Ginny. Tom Savini was offered to do the special effects, however he passed on the project to do another campground slasher called The Burning. I find it ironic that Tom Savini couldn't imagine Jason, the drowned boy in the lake, to be a fully grown, deformed, mute adult, and then went off and did a movie where the killer, Cropsey, is a fully grown, deformed, mute adult. Go figure.
What is this, a joke?
But instead, the special effects for Friday 2 would fall to the responsibility of Carl Fullerton and John Caglione Jr. These two did an absolutely fabulous job, and it's a shame that some of the best, goriest shots in the film got watered down by the MPAA ratings board. Many of the kills in this movie were actually much bloodier and gorier than originally shown, and director Steve Miner has lamented over how much footage had to be dropped just to get an R rating and to get the film released in theaters. The soundtrack would be handled by Harry Manfredini, who had masterfully handled the soundtrack on the first film. Final girl Adrienne King would reprise her role as Alice from the first film, only to be killed off pre-title card sequence in the sequel, which is a trope that would continue on in other slasher films. The opening kill teases out its audience for a full 12 minutes before the title card, including a fake out with a cat, another classic trope, and even a killer point of view fake out with the camera work itself. The only other character to return from the first film was Crazy Ralph, played once again by Walt Gorney. Sadly, Ralph would not make it out of this film. However, the Friday the 13th series would have other doomsayers and harbingers later on in the series to spiritually pick up where Crazy Ralph left off. Particularly, we have the groundskeeper, the cemetery groundskeeper in part 6, and I think in part 8 there's a deckhand on the ship that's also kind of a Crazy Ralph type character. Jason was played by 4 different people in this movie. For the opening sequence, which was shot last over the course of 2 days, the killer was played by Jerry Wallace, who is billed in the credits as the Prowler. A few of the feet and leg insert shots were done by costume designer Ellen Lutter, making her the only woman to portray Jason Voorhees. Thirdly, a man named Warrington Gillette was hired to play Jason. However, it became very apparent soon after filming started that he was not comfortable with any of the stunts required of him. However, he had to be kept for the film's finale since the unmasked face mold was made just for him. Gillette's agent got him booked in the credits as Jason Voorhees even though he didn't actually do most of the stunts. Saving the best for last, the real bulk of the acting and stunt work was done by Steven Daskowitz, nicknamed Steve Dash. He played Baghead Jason, or Jason's stunt double as he's credited. Steve does an excellent job here showing expression with just his body language and one single eye. The fact that he played what would be one of the most iconic killers in cinema history while being practically blind the whole time is a feat unto itself. The filming process, especially shooting the kills and special effects, was a grueling affair. One small mistake, and apparently there would be many, would delay shooting for hours on end while they reset. Steve Dash would make frequent trips to the hospital in the middle of the night, and the cast were put up in tents for the duration of the shoot, which was not very well insulated against the cold and the rain. The film was shot in Kent, Connecticut. Despite the fact that the production was constantly racing against the clock and the elements and just pure dumb bad luck, the on-set morality seemed pretty high. Everyone was apparently really happy while on set. In his book, Making Friday the 13th, The Legend of Camp Blood, David Grove quotes John Fury, who played Paul. "We all got along very well. We were young, working on a major movie, having the time of our lives." Russell Todd, who played Scott, would recall, "On free nights, we'd go into town to a bar or restaurant and enjoy ourselves. We were young, full of energy, and having the time of our lives making a horror film. What could be better?" In his book, Crystal Lake Memories, The Complete History of Friday the 13th, Peter Bracke quotes stunt coordinator Cliff Cudney as saying, "You know, despite the conditions and the challenges and the craziness, Part 2 is probably one of the most fun movies I've ever worked on because we had creative license. They had no idea how to do these things or what they wanted to do. As long as we make it gory and make it exciting and make it scary." Sadly, one of the greatest challenges that director Steve Miner would face in how well Friday 2 would be received was getting the film rated by the MPAA. Some of the effect shots and kills are way bloodier and gorier than what we got in the final product. Some shots were trimmed down for time, and some gore effects were cut completely. The film eventually got an R rating after being submitted at least 9 times, and agreed to snip 54 seconds of the goriest, bloodiest bits of the film. Fans of the first film would complain that Part 2 was tepid and not as gory as its predecessor, but honestly, that is not Steve Miner's fault. When it comes to the rating board, his hands are tied. These complaints come from a place of misunderstanding that the footage that we saw was severely truncated from the footage that was actually shot. The camp counselors, I feel, mesh really well with each other. A lot of the actors would hang out on set, and there were actual friendships and bonds that were being formed, and I feel like that shows in the film, all the more tragic when they get killed. Some of the counselors make it to a bar halfway through the film, and they all survive. Those that chose not to get drunk that night and stay at the camp suffer a far worse fate, which is actually kind of ironic. Some of the kills and chases have good tension and camera work. Steve Miner looked at what made the original Friday the 13th a success and really wanted to match it, if not top it. Of all our cast of characters, our final girl will be Ginny, played fabulously by Amy Steele. Amy did most of her own stunts, and her character Ginny, being a student in child psychology, is the only character in the series to really feel an empathy for Jason, the boy left for dead who grew to be an adult to witness his mother's murder. She's the first character in the series to really try to get into Jason's head and relate to him, even if it is in just self-defense. Ginny is empathetic and yet a strong survivor. She's an absolute badass of a final girl and doesn't get the spotlight in the Slasher Hall of Fame that some of her survivor sisters have. Sure, a lot of people talk about Laurie Strode from Halloween, Jess from Black Christmas, Alice from the first Friday the 13th, but Ginny deserves credit where credit is due. Friday the 13th Part 2 is a solid slasher, a great sequel that continues where the first one left off, and overall a really fun time packed into a tight 86-minute package with a bow on top. A very bloody bow. So if you've never seen Friday Part 2 before, or it's been a while since you've sat down with it, please set aside a little time for it and give it a view. As far as sequels go, it really doesn't suck. Well, that does it for me, and that does it for Friday the 13th Part 2. What are your thoughts on Friday Part 2? Or is there a horror sequel you'd like to see me cover in the future? Please leave a comment below. While you're there, I appreciate it if you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and stay notified for when I upload more content in the future. For today, I am Horror Man Mike. It is Friday the 13th in June of 2025, and this has been Sequels Don't Suck. Although I could do an entire video on Friday the 13th alone, that's not the focus here. And we are going to take that again because I trip over my words. The filming process, especially shooting the kills and... Hold on. I'm going to retake that. So if you've never seen Friday the 13th before, or it's been a while since you've sat down with it, please set aside a little time and give it a view. Let me give it another take. For today, I am Horror Man Mike. It is Friday the 13th in June of 2025, and this has been Sequels Don't Suck. And that was Suki the cat. This is my baby. Mwah! She doesn't like to be held like a baby, even though she is baby-shaped. You're a little baby, and I love you. Mwah! Kiss your little nose. And I send you off. Okay, that's it. That's the end of the video.